It's Christmas Eve, and I'm standing in front of my son's house, feeling a cold wind bite at my skin. I didn't plan on being here today, but after what he said to me last week, I knew I couldn't let it go. "You're not expected here this year, Dad," he told me over the phone, his voice dripping with indifference. No apology, no remorse, just the kind of coldness that cuts deeper than any blade. I used to think Christmas was about family. I used to believe that, no matter how much time had passed, no matter the distance, family always came together when it mattered most. But that day, my son's words shattered that belief. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said it, as though I was some inconvenience in his perfect life. You see, I've always done everything for my son. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every missed opportunity. But for him to turn his back on me like that, well, it was a betrayal I couldn't forgive. So I decided that if he didn't want me for Christmas, then I'd make sure he needed me, and not in a way he'd ever expect. It's too late for regrets now. The deed is done. But let me take you back to how it all started, how one small sentence set the stage for the most shocking Christmas of his life. I never imagined it would come to this. I was a young man once, full of hope and dreams. But life has a way of humbling you, doesn't it? It has a way of stripping you down, showing you the harsh realities. When my son was born, everything changed. I had always known I wanted to be a father, but I had no idea just how demanding it would be. I was 23 when he arrived, and I was already struggling to make ends meet. His mother, well, she left when he was barely a year old. She had her own life, her own plans, and suddenly I found myself a single father. It wasn't the life I envisioned, but it became my reality. I remember the first time I held him, how small and fragile he was. I swore to myself that I'd give him everything I never had, that I would be the father I never had. My father wasn't around. He left when I was little, too wrapped up in his own demons to be a presence in my life. So I vowed never to be that man. I was determined to make sure my son never felt that same loneliness I did growing up. I wasn't going to be the kind of dad who walked out. I was going to be the one who stayed. But staying wasn't as easy as I thought. It was just me and him against the world. Every day felt like a struggle. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs, just to keep a roof over our heads. There were days when I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open, but I pushed through. I didn't have the luxury of complaining. I had a son to raise. There was one Christmas in particular that still sticks with me. It was a few years after his mother left, and we didn't have much. I remember scraping together enough money to buy a small, cheap Christmas tree, and we hung paper ornaments on it, things I cut out myself. We couldn't afford presents, so I gave him what I could, a pair of worn-out sneakers I had fixed up and cleaned. I still remember the look on his face when he opened them. H. He didn't care that they were old or patched up. He was just so happy. He hugged me tight and said, "Thanks, Dad. I love you." And for that moment, it felt like I was doing something right. I didn't need much to be happy back then. I didn't need big gifts or fancy vacations. I just needed my son to feel safe, loved, and cared for. I gave him every ounce of myself, every bit of energy, every hour of sleep I sacrificed. But as the years passed, things didn't get easier. There were good moments, sure, like his first school play, where he had a small part as a sheep in the Christmas pageant. I remember how he beamed as he stood there, his little costume too big for him. I remember clapping for him like he was the most important person in the world, and he was. But there were also hard times. I remember days when I would sit at the kitchen table, bills scattered in front of me, and wonder how I was going to make it through the month. I didn't want to disappoint him. I wanted him to have a future, a chance at life that wasn't weighed down by the same struggles I had faced. So I kept going. I kept pushing, even when I felt like I was running on empty. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I worked long hours, sometimes taking on extra shifts, just to make sure he had everything he needed. I didn't buy myself new clothes for years, making sure he had new shoes every school year, making sure he had the things I couldn't afford when I was his age. I remember one winter when I had to sell my old car just to keep the lights on, but I didn't tell him. He didn't need to know. I didn't want him to worry. There were nights I came home so tired I could barely stand, but I'd still get up early the next morning to make him breakfast before he went to school. I tried to be there for every parent-teacher conference, every event. I wanted to be involved. I didn't want him to Eve, or feel like I was too busy to care. The loneliness was there, though. It always lurked in the background. There were nights when I ate dinner alone in the quiet house, and I'd wonder what it would have been like if things had turned out differently, if his mother had stayed, if I hadn't had to take on the weight of everything myself. But then, I'd remember my son, and I'd push those thoughts aside. I couldn't afford to think about my own emptiness. I had to focus on him. And I did. I focused on making sure he had everything I didn't. I worked hard to give him opportunities, good schools, a house, friends. But as the years went on, I started to notice things changing. The older he got, the more distant he became. He was still my son, but I wasn't sure I recognized the young man he was turning into. I never expected him to become an entitled stranger. Never thought I'd hear the words that shattered my heart. "You're not expected here this year, Dad." It didn't feel like betrayal at first. It just felt strange. I thought maybe it was just a phase, but deep down, I knew that I had been slowly losing him for years, and I was too blind to see it. I thought back to all those years, every hour I spent working, every sacrifice I made, and I wondered, had it all been for nothing? Had I given him everything only to be cast aside when I was no longer convenient? I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I stopped being Dad and became just another figure in the background of his life. Someone who was taken for granted, someone who no longer mattered as much as his new life, his new friends, and his growing family. I had always told myself that no matter what, I would be there for him. But now, I was the one left alone, and that's when it hit me, just how deeply this cut. I had given him everything, every sacrifice, every part of myself, and in return I got a cold, dismissive response, that Trows. Isthmus, I realized, was the final blow. The end of everything I had worked so hard to build. The betrayal wasn't just in the words he said, it was in the way he said them. Like I was just an inconvenience to him, like I didn't matter. And that was the moment when I knew I couldn't just sit back and take it anymore. It was time for him to learn what it felt like to have everything you take for granted ripped away. Christmas wouldn't be the same this year, and neither would he. The call came at an odd time, just a few days before Christmas. I'd been sitting in my worn-out armchair, the Christmas lights flickering faintly in the corner, trying to get into the spirit. I hadn't been able to sleep for days, my mind running through everything that had happened between me and my son. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way he'd started pulling away, spending more time with his friends and less with me. Maybe it was the odd silence between us when we spoke. When my phone rang, I thought, finally, he's calling to check in. I answered quickly, hoping to hear his voice. The voice of my son, the one I had raised from the moment he was born, the one I had given everything to, the one who was supposed to be the light of my life. But it wasn't the warm greeting I expected. "Hey, Dad!" His voice came through, distant, distracted. It wasn't the usual excited tone, or even the one that sounded like he was checking in. No, this was cold, detached. "Hey, son. Merry Christmas," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I was just thinking about you." There was a pause on the other end, a long one, a silence that gnawed at my insides. "Yeah, about that." His voice trailed off, and I could already hear the unease in it. My stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. "I just wanted to tell you that, we won't be having you over this year for Christmas." For a moment, I didn't even know how to respond. It was like a switch had been flipped, and suddenly the world around me seemed to crumble. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but it was hard. "It's Christmas, son. You know I've always come, year after year." I could hear the discomfort in his voice, and it only made the pain worse. "I know, but, we're doing things with Sarah's family this year, and, well, we just didn't expect you to come. I don't think you should." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Didn't expect me? He didn't expect me? My own son, the one I raised, he didn't expect me? It was like he had pulled away from me in an instant, like I was some afterthought, an inconvenience he couldn't be bothered with. You don't expect me? I repeated, my voice shaking. It felt surreal. Did I hear that right? There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line, followed by a hesitant, "Yeah, it's just, things are different now. You know, with everything that's been going on, it's just easier if you're not here this year." The words felt like daggers. Easier? Easier for him, perhaps. But for me, it was the deepest kind of rejection. For a moment I thought I might just drop the phone. My head felt dizzy, and the room seemed to close in around me. I tried to breathe, tried to make sense of what he was saying, but it didn't make sense. "I've been there for you your whole life, son," I said, my voice quieter now, but raw with hurt. "Through all of it. You know I've always done my best to be there, to support you, to be there for your Christmas. And this is how I'm treated?" There was a long pause before he spoke again, and when he did, his voice sounded as if he were reading off a script. "It's not about that, Dad. We're starting our own traditions now. You'll understand." Traditions? Was I really just an afterthought? Something to be shoved aside when it wasn't convenient anymore? Something that didn't matter? "I do understand," Linda, I said, the anger starting to rise. "What I'm having trouble understanding is how you can forget everything I've done for you. How you can forget me, your father, just because you've got a new family. I've always been there for you, son. Always." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to let him see me weak, not like this. He sighed heavily, like he was annoyed at my persistence. "Dad, it's just not the same anymore. It's not like it used to be. I have a wife, kids, and, well, there's not really room for you anymore. I've got my own responsibilities now." His words cut like glass, each one shattering my heart into smaller and smaller pieces. It was clear now. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was about everything. "Not the same anymore?" I repeated, my voice rising with a bitterness I couldn't suppress. "Not the same anymore? You think it wasn't hard for me when your mother left? You think I didn't have my own struggles? I was the one who gave everything to make sure you had a good life. I worked myself to the bone just so you wouldn't have to go without. And this is what I get in return?" There was another silence. I could feel him squirming on the other end. But then, as if trying to diffuse the tension, he added, "Look, I'm sorry, okay? It's just easier this way. I've got a family to think about now. I'm not a kid anymore." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't hear another word. "Easier? Easier?" "That's it, huh?" I choked out, my words thick with disbelief. "You don't even have the decency to be honest with me. And now I'm just a burden?" He didn't respond. I think he realized how deep he had gone, but it didn't matter now. It was like the last thread of my connection to him had snapped. The love I had poured into him, the sacrifices I made, it all felt worthless. "You know what?" I said, my voice colder now, the anger starting to bubble over. "If I'm such an inconvenience, maybe I'll just take myself out of the picture completely. Maybe I'll make sure you really don't expect me anymore. You'll learn what it's like when you take someone for granted. You'll learn what happens when you think that your old man is just going to sit back and take it." I didn't wait for his response. I hung up the phone before he could say another word. The click of the receiver was the final sound, the final blow. I sat there, staring at the phone, my chest tight. The rage was building now, the heat rising in my face. But there was something else, something deeper, a pit in my stomach that I couldn't fill with anger. I just felt hollow, empty, abandoned. I couldn't believe it. After everything I had done, after all the years of sacrifice, this was how he repaid me, with cold words, with selfishness, with disrespect. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to just sit idly by while my son, the person I had given everything for, threw me aside like I was nothing. No. If he didn't expect me for Christmas, then I was going to make sure he needed me. But it wouldn't be the way he thought. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand long after the call ended. The hollow hum of the dial tone still echoed in my ears, but the words, his words, kept replaying in my mind. "You're not expected here this year, Dad." It felt like a knife cutting through my chest. But the tears didn't come. The tears that had been welling up when I first heard the words were gone, replaced by something colder, a feeling that started in my stomach and crawled its way up to my throat. Disbelief turned to anger, and with the anger came a clarity, a sick kind of focus. I had been hit with enough rejection in my life to know that I couldn't just let this go. Not this time. Not after everything I had sacrificed. Not after giving him every part of myself. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, but I didn't feel the shaking. I felt something else. I felt a cold, burning resolve begin to settle in my chest. Enough is enough. That thought stuck in my mind like a mantra. I had been patient. Too patient, perhaps. I had given him every chance, given him all the time he needed to come around. But it was clear now. He wasn't going to. He had his own life, his own family, and I, his father, had become nothing more than an afterthought, a fading memory he could put aside when it was inconvenient. I had raised him. I had sacrificed everything for him, yet here I was, tossed aside like some irrelevant relic. All my efforts, everything I had given, reduced to nothing more than an obligation he could shrug off. It wasn't just the rejection that hurt. It wasn't just the Christmas that I had been so desperately looking forward to. It was the utter disrespect, the way he could say those words so casually, as if I meant nothing to him anymore. "Easier this way," he said. Easier. The word clung to me. It wrapped itself around my thoughts and twisted deep into my gut. I had spent my life making sure he had everything he needed, everything he wanted. But what had I gotten in return? Nothing. And no, it wasn't about the gifts. It wasn't about what I had given him in material things. It was about what I had sacrificed, my time, my dreams, my very well-being for him. And this was how he repaid me? By telling me he didn't expect me for Christmas? By letting me know with cold indifference that I was no longer needed? I was a fool to think things would be different. But that was the last time I'd let him treat me like this. The last time I'd let anyone take me for granted. My heart raced now, but it wasn't out of sadness or grief. It was from something else, a burning fury that was threatening to spill over. I couldn't let him get away with this. Not this time, not after everything. He had crossed a line, and now it was my turn to make sure he learned the consequences of that. I leaned back in the chair, my thoughts spiraling into a storm. The quiet of the house felt suffocating, the silence only making the hurt worse. I thought back to every single time I had bailed him out, every time I had worked overtime, sacrificed my own comfort, and been there for him when no one else would. The years of late nights, the broken promises to myself. All of it. What did he care? He had his family, his house, his life, but he wasn't going to take mine for granted any longer. He thinks I'm a joke? I had always told myself that I would be there for him, through thick and thin. But now I saw the truth. It was a one-way street. I had done everything for him, and in return, I was nothing. That's when the plan started forming. Slow at first, like a spark. I couldn't just let him off the hook, not after what he had done. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. No more second chances, no more being overlooked. I had put him in a place of comfort. I had made his life easier than it ever should have been. But now, I was going to make him feel the consequences. He thought he could push me away like this? Fine, but he would soon realize what happens when you take someone for granted. The first thing I did was think about the house, his house, the mortgage. I had co-signed for it years ago, something I thought would help him build his future. I had trusted him, but what had he done with that trust? He had abandoned me, thrown me aside like an old coat. And now it was time to take back what he had taken from me. I wasn't going to ruin his life, but I was going to teach him a lesson, a hard one, A lesson that he would never forget. My hands clenched into fists as I sat in that chair. The rage that had been bubbling inside me was now fully realized, a boiling pot of fury and hurt. But beneath the anger, there was something else, a cold, sharp determination. This was no longer about being sad. This wasn't about feeling sorry for myself. This was about justice, about showing him the real cost of taking me for granted. I walked over to the kitchen table, picking up the bank statement that had been sitting there for days. It was time. I had the power to make him feel the weight of what he had done. The mortgage payment, the one I had been co-signing for him for all these years, was due, and I knew something he didn't. One missed payment, and everything would begin to unravel. One missed payment, and the bank would start calling. He would be forced to feel the pressure. The pieces fell into place. It was perfect. He had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and dialed the bank. My fingers shook as I listened to the ringing, but I didn't care. I had made my decision. There was no going back now. The line clicked, and I heard a voice on the other end. I spoke slowly, carefully. I told them to cancel the mortgage payment. No more warnings, no more chances. When the call ended, I stood there for a moment, letting the silence sink in. I knew it would be hard for him. I knew it would cause him stress, and maybe even force him to fight for what he had taken for granted. But that was the point. He needed to learn what it felt like to need me, to understand the consequences of throwing someone aside. And I swore, as I looked out the window into the quiet night, that I would never again let anyone walk all over me. This Christmas, I wasn't the one who would be left out. This Christmas, he would feel the sting of his own actions. Enough is enough. I didn't rush into this. No, this wasn't going to be some knee-jerk reaction, some spur-of-the-moment outburst. This was something calculated, something I had been stewing over since that phone call. The moment I hung up, I knew that everything had changed. There would be no going back. I sat quietly in my living room, the Christmas lights on the tree flickering in the corner. The glow was warm, but the air felt cold around me. My anger was still fresh, still raw, but I was starting to feel something else, something colder, something more controlled. I wasn't just going to ruin Christmas for him. No, that would be too easy. I needed to make him feel the consequences of his actions. I needed to hit him where it would hurt the most. His house, his pride, the life he had built that he was so ready to forget me in. I didn't have the full plan worked out at that moment, but I knew one thing for sure. It would be methodical. It would be surgical. And most importantly, it would be something he would never see coming. The first step was simple. I needed information. I had been involved in his finances for years, always quietly in the background, never making waves. I was the one who had co-signed his mortgage when he first bought the house. The one who had supported him through every step, made sure his payments were on time, and made sure he had a roof over his head. That's the kind of father I was. Always there, always making sure he didn't have to worry. But now, I would use that same knowledge against him. I went to my desk and pulled out a file I hadn't touched in months, the papers for his mortgage. It was almost too easy to pull up his account details. I had been the one to set everything up, so I had access. I could see his employment history, the due dates, the amounts. I could even see his balance, just how much he still owed. It felt strange in a way to be looking at this again, like I was betraying him, or maybe betraying myself by planning this. But then I remembered his voice, that cold indifference in it, how easily he had discarded me. It was no longer about him. It was about me, about reclaiming my power, my dignity. The second step was a little more delicate. I needed to make sure he wouldn't catch on. I couldn't just cancel the mortgage payment out of nowhere. He would ask questions. He would get suspicious. No, I had to play this slow. I needed to make sure he thought everything was normal, right up until the moment it all came crashing down. So, I kept quiet. No more phone calls. No more checking in on him. No more asking how he was doing. He thought I didn't matter? Fine. Let him think that. The silence between us grew more profound, more unbearable, and with each passing day, my resolve hardened. I started putting the pieces together step by step. I wasn't going to just let him drown in the stress of a missed payment. I would wait, watch, let the tension build, and when the moment was right, I would make the call. The third step was even more precise. I needed to get the timing right. I knew when his mortgage payment was due, right after Christmas. A perfect time to strike. The holidays would be chaos. He would be too distracted, too focused on his family, on the new traditions he had created to notice anything out of the ordinary. I took out my phone and texted my lawyer, someone I had known for years. He wasn't a close friend, but he owed me a few favors. I had helped him out in the past, and now it was time to cash in on that. I needed to know if there was any legal recourse for me to cancel the payment without him immediately knowing who had done it. My lawyer was prompt as usual. His reply was short and to the point. It's doable, but you'll have to move fast. If he misses a payment, the bank will call it a default. You'll have a window before they start any formal proceedings, but it'll be a while before they take action. You have time, but not much. It was the confirmation I needed. Everything was in place. I had to wait for the right moment to pull the trigger. I couldn't afford to rush. I had learned that much over the years. Patience, control. But there was one more thing I had to consider. What if he found out? What if he put two and two together and realized I was behind it? He might be angry, but anger was nothing compared to the humiliation he would feel. I didn't want him to think I was some petty person who acted out of impulse. No, I needed him to believe this was justice. I needed him to feel every ounce of the disrespect he had shown me, but in a way that was quiet and devastating. A reminder that I wasn't a man to be taken lightly. I had an old friend who worked at the bank where his mortgage was held. A friend I hadn't spoken to in years, but someone who had always been willing to help when needed. I reached out, casually at first, under the guise of checking in. He had no idea what I was planning. He didn't need to. I just needed to plant the seed. We talked for a while, catching up about our lives, and I made sure to mention that I was still co-signed on my son's mortgage. Just a casual mention, nothing more. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer more information. He didn't need to know the full extent of my plan. But when the time came, I would have his support. The days dragged on. Christmas was almost here, and I could feel the tension building. My son had all but forgotten me, but I knew he wouldn't forget the consequences of his actions. I had everything in place. The paperwork was ready. The lawyer was on call. The bank contact was lined up. All I needed was to sit back and let the plan unfold. But there was still something else I had to consider. My own heart. I couldn't help but wonder if I was becoming the thing I had always hated. Was I really doing the right thing? Was I so desperate for payback that I was willing to destroy everything for the sake of my pride? Then I remembered his voice. "You're not expected here this year, Dad." And suddenly, all doubts evaporated. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming what I had lost. It was about making him see that he couldn't just discard me, that I wasn't someone who would go quietly into the background. When the time came, and it would come soon, I would make sure he understood the cost of his choices. It was time. The plan was set. And when it hit him, when the mortgage payment was canceled, it would be my Christmas gift to him. A reminder of who his father really was. The days between Christmas and New Year's felt like an eternity. I had everything in place, and yet the waiting was unbearable. Each day I sat with my thoughts, replaying the plan over and over in my head, making sure nothing could go wrong. I could almost feel the tension in the air, a sense that something was about to snap, and when it did, it would be devastating. The moment arrived sooner than I expected. It was the day after Christmas. My son's house, his precious new life. It would all start to unravel today. I had made the call to the bank a few hours earlier, instructing them to cancel the mortgage payment. It was a simple task for them, but the impact would be monumental. The payment was due on the 27th, so when the bank halted the transaction, they would send a notification to him. A gentle nudge that something was wrong. But the real kicker would come a few days later, when the missed payment would officially be marked as delinquent. That's when the stress would start. That's when he'd have no choice but to face the consequences of his thoughtless actions. But that wasn't all. I wasn't going to let him off the hook with just a canceled mortgage payment. No, I had another surprise waiting for him. I had kept a close eye on his finances over the years. Nothing illegal, just the occasional check-in, ensuring he didn't go overboard. I knew how much he was spending, how tight his budget was with the new house, and how dependent he was on the stability of that mortgage. If I could make that fall apart, everything else would crumble with it. I knew about the vacation fund he'd been saving for, a trip to some island paradise with his wife and kids. He'd been planning it for months, boasting about it every chance he got. What he didn't know was that I'd been quietly keeping track of his credit card usage, watching him pile up the expenses. The day before Christmas, I made sure to discreetly inform his credit card company of a suspicious charge on his account, one that would trigger an immediate freeze on his funds. His day was about to get a whole lot worse. That evening, I waited. The silence in the house was almost suffocating, but I couldn't take my eyes off the phone, the screen glowing with anticipation. I knew what would happen soon, his first sign of trouble. Just after dinner, I received an email notification. Mortgage payment unsuccessful. The bank had sent it. It was the first of many consequences, but it wouldn't be the most devastating. I didn't contact him. No, I let the events unfold on their own. I let the weight of the situation hit him without warning. I wanted him to experience the full extent of his mistake without me lifting a finger. The next day, my phone buzzed. It was him, my son. He wasn't calling to apologize, though. He wasn't calling to ask how I was doing. No, he was calling because he had noticed something was wrong. "Dad," he said, his voice sharp and frantic, "I just got a notification from the bank saying the mortgage payment didn't go through. What's going on? Did you stop the payment?" His voice was high-pitched, laced with panic. Good, I thought. Good. You should be scared. "No, son," I said calmly, my voice deceptively quiet. "I didn't stop the payment. You know, it's funny. You'd think they would have sent you a reminder first. But I guess they don't really do that anymore, huh? It's kind of funny how they just go ahead and do it, without asking for your opinion." He went silent for a moment. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. It was obvious he was trying to figure out what was going on. "I don't get it," he said. "What do you mean? Is this your way of punishing me? Over Christmas?" I let out a small, knowing chuckle. "No, son. It's not punishment. It's called consequences." Another long pause. His confusion turned to frustration. "Dad, stop. This isn't funny. You're messing with my life, and this could ruin everything. Maybe it's time you understood what it feels like when you mess with someone else's life," I said, my words cutting through the air with a sharpness that matched the anger building inside me. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you tossed me aside like I was nothing. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas, remember?" His tone shifted. He was no longer trying to pretend he didn't care. He was starting to realize the full weight of what was happening. You really went this far?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You really canceled the mortgage? Why?" "Because you're a grown man now, son. You've got everything you ever wanted. A house, a family, a life. You don't need me anymore, right? You didn't expect me for Christmas. Fine. You can handle this on your own. You don't need your old man anymore." There was no response. I knew he didn't know what to say. He didn't deserve an answer. But I wasn't done yet. No, the real twist was still to come. Later that evening, I got another notification on my phone. "Your credit card payment has been flagged." I knew he'd find out about that next. The next time he called, he sounded even more frantic. "Dad, this is insane. My credit card's been frozen. They said there's been suspicious activity, and now I can't access any of my funds. What the hell is going on?" I didn't miss a beat. "Maybe it's because you've been spending money like it's free, son. You know, I've been keeping track. I know about the vacation you're planning. Looks like you won't be able to afford that little getaway after all, huh? You did that? His voice trembled with disbelief and anger. What the hell is wrong with you? Me? I repeated, feigning confusion. What's wrong with you, son? You think you can just toss me aside, ignore me like I don't matter? Well, now you see what happens when you don't appreciate the people who've been there for you. I could hear his breath quickening. This is insane. I don't even know what to say anymore. I didn't expect you to. You really went this far? You're going to learn a lesson today, son, I said coldly. And maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice before you treat the people who love you like crap. Then came the final blow. The bank, as I knew they would, started to send formal notices, warnings of late fees and eventually a default notice. He would have to face the harsh reality of what had happened. His credit would be affected. The pressure would build until he could no longer ignore it. By the time he called me the next day, I could feel the defeat in his voice. Dad, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to do. The bank's threatening foreclosure. My credit's ruined. Everything's falling apart. I let the silence hang for a moment before speaking. Maybe now you understand what it feels like to be discarded. Maybe now you understand what it's like when someone you trust turns their back on you. You'll figure it out, son. You always do. But from here on out, you'll remember this lesson. The weight of my revenge settled over me like a heavy fog. It wasn't just about ruining his Christmas. It was about teaching him what happens when you take someone for granted, when you ignore the person who's always been there for you. And as I sat in the quiet of my home, I realized that there was no better way to make him understand than to take away the one thing he held most dear, the life he thought he had secured, the life he thought he could build without me. I had made him feel everything. I had made him need me. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all. The aftermath of everything was almost surreal. There was no fanfare, no dramatic confrontation, no instant closure where everything was neatly tied up. No. What followed was a slow, agonizing process for both of us. In the days after I pulled the trigger on my plan, I watched as my son's life fell apart, piece by piece. The phone calls kept coming, and each time I saw a little more fear in his eyes, a little more defeat in his voice. The mortgage payment hadn't gone through, and he was too proud to ask for help. His vacation plans were canceled, his credit was frozen, and his finances were a mess. It was like watching a house of cards crumble. But what hurt the most was the silence between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of what I had done and what had led me to do it. I wasn't proud of myself, not entirely, but I wasn't sorry either. I stayed in my own space, a quiet corner of my house, for the first few days. I didn't reach out to him, though I knew he was desperately trying to reach me. His messages came in waves, but I ignored them. He had taken me for granted for far too long, and now he had to understand the consequences of his actions. My heart ached every time I saw his name flash on my screen, but I knew this was the only way to make him feel what I had felt for years: invisible, forgotten, unimportant. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the mortgage. No, it was the years of neglect, the dismissive comments, the way he acted like I was just another inconvenience in his busy life. It was the hurt that had built up quietly, like water rising in a dam, until finally I had no choice but to release it. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, I could feel the tension slowly slipping away from my shoulders. It wasn't a triumphant feeling. It wasn't like some movie scene where the villain basks in their victory. No, this was more like the heavy weight lifting off my chest, but leaving behind an emptiness, a hole that wasn't there before, one I hadn't expected to find. I had gotten my revenge, but I had also lost something in the process. What started as a desire to teach him a lesson had turned into something else entirely. I hadn't just punished him. I had isolated myself. I had become someone I didn't recognize, a man who could manipulate and hurt his own flesh and blood simply to make a point. Then, A few weeks later, the phone rang. It was him. "Dad." His voice was hoarse, tired. There was no bravado, no deflection, just raw emotion. I don't know where to start. Everything's a mess. I don't know how to fix it. My credit's ruined. The house is in jeopardy. And I don't even know how to tell my wife." I stayed quiet for a moment. I wanted to say something cold, something that would remind him of what he had done. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "What do you want me to say?" He was silent for a while, and I could almost hear the tears in his eyes. I need help, Dad. I know I screwed up. I should have been there for you. I should have been a better son. But now, I'm drowning, and I don't know how to fix it without you." I felt my heart clench at those words. It was the first time in a long time that I'd heard him speak like that. The arrogance had dropped. The pride was gone. He was just a man, struggling to keep his life from falling apart. And then, something inside me shifted. It wasn't the satisfaction of revenge anymore. It was something else. Regret, maybe. Sadness? Definitely. But also a sense of finality. He had learned his lesson. But I had learned one too. Revenge doesn't bring back what was lost. I knew what I had to do. "All right, son," I said quietly. "I'll help you. But this is the last time. You've got to earn this. You've got to show me you've learned something. I won't just fix it because you want me to. You've got to work to get back what you've lost." His voice cracked. "Thank you, Dad. I swear I'll do whatever it takes." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed him. The following weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, financial restructuring, and long conversations. I helped him straighten out his mortgage, got his credit card issues fixed, and even gave him a little money to tide him over. But the help wasn't unconditional. I made sure he understood that this wasn't a free pass. I reminded him often that if he ever took me for granted again, there would be consequences, and next time they might not be so easy to fix. By the time things started to settle down, the Christmas season had long passed, and the new year was already on the horizon. There was no big happy ending, no tearful reunion at the dinner table. There was no forgiveness that erased everything, but there was something else, something quieter, more lasting. There was understanding. I spent the next few months reflecting on everything that had happened. What had I really accomplished? Yes, I had made him feel the pain of being ignored. I had forced him to reckon with the consequences of his actions. But had it been worth it? What had I gained from it, other than a deeper understanding of how fragile our relationships really are? The truth is, I didn't know. But what I did know was that revenge doesn't heal the wounds that are left behind. It doesn't undo the years of neglect, the years of hurt. All it does is leave you with a sense of emptiness when it's all said and done. It makes you realize that, no matter how much you might want to punish someone for their wrongs, the only real punishment is the distance that grows between you, the silence that follows. The moral of this story is simple, but hard to accept. Revenge is a poison, and in the end, it will poison you too. In seeking to make my son understand the pain I felt, I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of cruelty and bitterness. And while he had learned his lesson, I had learned me's. And two, that real justice, real healing, comes not through vengeance, but through understanding and forgiveness. It's easy to let anger rule you, to think that punishing someone will somehow make things right. But in the end, all it does is hollow you out, piece by piece. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from the need to get even. I don't know what the future holds for my son and me, but I know this. I won't make the same mistake twice. And maybe, just maybe, neither will he. But one thing's for sure. I will never forget the lesson I learned. And I'll never expect anything from anyone again, because when you do, that's when you set yourself up to be hurt.